Okay, so we are going to start now. So welcome everybody to our second webinar of 2013. Today's topic is Reading Comprehension Strategies for Success. And today we have Katie Bain, English Language Fellow in Barranquilla, Colombia, joining us as a speaker. Thanks a lot, Katie, for joining us today. And thanks for everybody who are connected right now. And welcome. You can start your presentation at any moment, Katie.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Thank you, Alfredo, and everybody who has made this webinar happen. And thank you all of you out there who are participating today in the webinar. It's my pleasure to talk to you about this topic today. I've been a teacher for 10 years, teaching English for 10 years. I guess this is my 11th year as an educator. And yeah, my master's degree is in reading education. So reading comprehension is something I know a little bit about, and hopefully you can share some of your ideas, some of the things that have worked in your classroom today, and hopefully you'll get a couple of good ideas for your classroom as well. All right, so let's begin. Let's see. I am having trouble finding the navigation. There we go. All right. So today, this is our objective, that you will build upon what you already know about reading strategies and try to help to improve your students' reading proficiency. So if you can just take a minute to think about what you already know about reading comprehension in English or in Spanish or whatever else your first language may be. If you can respond in the chat box with the answers to 2 questions. What makes reading easy for you in any language, and what makes reading difficult? So in the chat box, if you can just take a minute to respond and say something like, reading is easy for me when, or reading is difficult for me when. So what makes reading easy or difficult? Okay, a lack of vocabulary. Yep. What else? So that makes it difficult, a lack of vocabulary. What are some other things that make it easy or difficult for you? If it's not interesting, yep. If you're in a nice environment, that's helpful as well. So if you're in a nice, quiet, peaceful place, it's a lot easier to read than if you're in a difficult environment. Or if you don't know very much about the particular topic, that makes it a lot more difficult as well. Right, difficult or unknown topic. Good. Anything that makes it easy? Images. Yeah, images and a good environment. Thank you. Great. So these are things that make reading easy or difficult for us, or that make it easy or difficult for your students as well. So here's another question for you. What is the point of reading? Why should we be reading? So first of all, why is reading important for you as a teacher or an educator? And then why is it important for your students? If you can just respond with a couple of comments in the chat box. Why is reading important? It's good. It's a source of information. What else? It's fun. I like that one. To get knowledge. Good. Vocabulary. We learn about different subjects. Building knowledge. We can communicate more effectively. Great. It teaches us structures of language, expands our mind. Excellent. You guys are all thinking, well, most of you, I think, are thinking very similarly to how I am thinking. So I'm just going to go through a few reasons for reading. Why is reading a good idea? Just a moment. Have you guys seen Late Night with David Letterman before? He's a really popular late night talk show host in the United States. And usually, like once a week, he comes up with a top 10 list, and it's all from his own head, right? It's not really that much about research or whatever. It's usually kind of funny, that sort of thing. So I decided I was going to make my own top 10 list of why reading is so great. So these aren't really research-based. They're more intuitive. But this is just, some reasons I thought that we should discuss about why reading is a good and important thing. And I would encourage you to do the same thing with your students as sort of a motivational tool. Maybe ask them to brainstorm a list of 10 reasons why reading is great, and then you can post it in the classroom on a poster, something like that, just to keep them reminded of why they are doing what they're doing. All right. So number 10, reading is relaxing. So some of my best and most peaceful moments have been on a beach with a good book or magazine, or when it's cold in my house in the U.S., I like to snuggle up with a good book and a blanket, maybe some hot chocolate. And also it's a little better for me than just watching movies or staring out the window, something like that, because I feel like it's a nice sense of accomplishment. I feel like I'm learning something, even if it's a novel, and it's a good sense of accomplishment while I'm relaxing. All right, number 9. Number 9 is reading improves critical thinking skills, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about some of these later on in the presentation. But critical thinking skills are things like comparing, contrasting, summarizing, making predictions, evaluating, drawing conclusions, and synthesizing. And as we're actively reading, we are constantly doing these things. We might be making judgments or evaluations about characters in a novel or about politicians in an article we're reading in a magazine or a newspaper. We might be comparing what's happening in 2 different countries. We might be drawing conclusions about policies or things that are going on around the world. So these are all ways that we're improving our critical thinking skills as we're active readers. Number 8 is that reading helps you understand the rules of languages. So in your native language or in a language you are learning, a text that you read usually, not always as we know, but usually presents you with standard word order and native ways of expressing ideas in a language. And that can help you in your first language or your second language to be a more effective communicator and to understand some hopefully well thought out ideas. Number 7 is, as many of you said in the first question, is that reading helps you to acquire knowledge. So that's a very general, basic, obvious thought that we have about reading, but it definitely does. It helps us to know more about the world. And knowing more about anything contributes to our potential to be actively involved and purposely contributing to causes we care about, and hopefully to be a little more tolerant of those around us as well. Number 6 is reading opens your mind to new ideas. So it's not always possible to travel to new places or to have new experiences, that sort of thing. But reading is a way to hear someone else's perspective and to get an idea of all of the different types of situations and backgrounds and experiences that others have. And so that hopefully will, like I kind of mentioned before, but that will hopefully help us to be a little bit more empathetic towards others and tolerant of people who are different from us. Number 5, reading helps you to determine your own ideas. So number 6 was that reading opens your mind to new ideas. Number 5, reading helps you determine your own ideas, I think. So as your mind is open to new ideas, your original thoughts, biases, and beliefs are challenged. And you can sort of develop and establish your own ways of thinking as you are also understanding other people's ways of thought. Number 4, reading is a way to engage in a conversation with an author. So face-to-face, real-time conversation with other people is great. And sometimes it's a really deep conversation, and sometimes it's kind of shallow. And books, articles, blogs, tweets, Facebook posts, those are they also can vary from being very deep comments or paragraphs or chapters, or they can also be very shallow. But when you read, you are usually experiencing something that took the author at least a little bit of time and thought. And as a reader, you are also given some time and space to consider new ideas without the immediate pressure of response. Number 3, as some of you mentioned, reading develops your vocabulary. So in your native or other language, reading shows and provides you with context for many new words. And these are words that you may have never come across in conversation. Number 2 reason that reading is great is that reading brings opportunity. So a lot of times reading guides you to opportunities you may not have known about, and you might find ways of how to travel, to study, to get a scholarship, find a job, get a driver's license, find a good restaurant, or even in today's day and age, it might help you to get a date, right? So reading really brings us opportunities that we may never have found without picking up an article or reading something online or a book. And the number 1 reason why reading is great is that it's fun, right? Reading is fun. So some of you, and hopefully most of you, feel the same way about reading as I do, that it's fun. You're here today at the webinar maybe because you like reading and you think it's important. But honestly, for a lot of us, it wouldn't be that fun if we weren't at least minimally successful with it. So for example, I am sure that soccer is fun for some of you guys, that football is fun for some of you, and that you love it. But for me, it's not really, I don't really think about it, and it's not one of the things I think, okay, I'm excited to play soccer or football today, because I'm not good at it, and also I don't know very much about it. Perhaps if I had started playing soccer when I was a young girl and had learned about it then and become proficient in playing soccer, then maybe I would love it now. But that's not the case, so it's not something that I consider as fun. So, and also we know that many of our students don't necessarily think that reading is fun. Some of them do, and some of them don't. But they do need to be motivated to read and successful at reading in order to become lifelong readers. And developing lifelong readers and learners should be one of our goals as teachers. And so the rest of the presentation is going to be about motivating our students to read, and then about how to help them to find success with reading. All right, so if you could just answer the first question for a second, and then we'll move to the second question here about reading motivation. First, you can just respond with yes, no, or sort of, or anything like that. Are your students motivated to read? So I see some of them. Very few. Okay, depends on the topic. Not really. Okay, so it looks like, okay, we do, it looks like a lot of sometimes or sort ofs. A couple of yeses if it's purposeful for them, like Betty says, it's they need to read for their career, or it depends on the topic, from Maria Luisa. A lot of students don't like reading, from Diana. Okay, so yeah, so it sounds like about maybe we would say about half of our students like to read. Yeah, we'll see. And here's the second question. Let's take a minute to answer the second question. What are some ways to motivate students to read? What are some things you can do in the classroom to motivate your students to read? Good. Find out about their passions or what interests them, and persuade them to read things on those topics. Good. Pictures. Introducing vocabulary with pictures. Great. Try to make them aware of why reading is important. Find a good place. Excellent. Yeah, it's a good thing to kind of have a routine and a place where you're going to always read. Song lyrics. Great. Creating a good environment. Great. All right, and things that are interesting for them. Very good. All right, so let's talk about reading motivation, and I'm going to show you guys some classroom tips about how you can motivate your students to read. Maybe you're already doing these things. Maybe they are new for you, but hopefully they will be a good encouragement for you to engage your students as readers. All right, here's finally some research after all of my ideas and top 10 lists. Here's finally a little bit of research, okay? So reading motivation is important. So that's an obvious thing for us as educators, but it's always good to have it backed up by a little bit of study. So a report of the Program for International Student Assessment found that interest in reading predicted students' reading comprehension. So across all 64 countries participating in this study, students who enjoyed reading the most performed significantly better than students who enjoyed reading the least. So the study basically found something out that seems obvious, right? The students who like to read better and understand what they read more competently. And we might ask the question, so which comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? Do students enjoy reading because they're good at it, or are they good at reading because they enjoy it? And we might never know the answer completely to that question, but we must go with what we know, which tells us that motivation helps their reading comprehension. So we want to engage students' interest and motivation so that they can be more competent in reading comprehension. And we must find ways to engage and motivate them in the classroom to improve their chances of becoming lifelong learners and readers. So I gave you a top 10 list, and now I'm going to give us, now we're going to discuss 7 rules of engagement, and I'm going to just give you a little classroom tip after each rule. All right, rule number 1, students are more motivated to read when the reading tasks and activities are relevant to their lives. So relevant is just, it connects to their lives. It has something to do with their lives. So students must understand that what they're reading connects to their lives either emotionally, experientially, or purposefully. So how can we help them to see that reading connects to their lives? Here's a classroom tip. Students can keep a reading diary. They can draw, write, and discuss how what they have read connects to their lives. So, for example, if you read a story in class or something like that, your students can just write a quick sentence. You can give them examples before you do this, but they can write a quick sentence that says something like, this reminds me of, or this connects to my life because, or I can use the information I learned in the reading to, and if you're teaching higher level students or university students, maybe as someone mentioned before, students are motivated to read when it has to do with their career or has to do maybe with the major that they have chosen for college or for university. So you might want to, after they've finished reading, have a class discussion or have them write in a journal about how what they have read will apply to their professional lives or their personal lives in the future. Rule number 2. Students are more motivated to read when they have access to a wide range of reading materials. And depending on your context, this may be something that your students have or something that is more difficult to get for them. So if you can just tell me yes, no, or sort of. Are there many books for your students in English or in Spanish that your students have access to? Can I just get a little bit of an idea? Good. Andres in Medellin said there are many books, especially on the internet, but some of them don't really know how to find them. There is a lack. Okay. Okay, so it kind of depends on the context. I see some yeses and nos depending on where you work, where you teach. But Andres brought up a really good point, which is that they might have access to a wide range of materials, like the internet kind of has a lot, but they might not know how to download those materials, or they might not know where the library is or how they can get a card for the library, that sort of thing. So if your students do have access to a wide range of materials, sometimes it's difficult. So here are some tips. All right, so one thing you can do as a teacher is you can download free books online and show your students how to do the same. On my website, which is right there, which I'm also going to write again at the end of the presentation, I'll write it down in the chat box. I have, I think, 10 websites there where you can download free books online. So you can show your students where those are. You can, if it's possible, if you have access to a printer and a good, have a lot of paper resources, then you can print some of those out and put them in your classroom. But that's just a good resource. If your students have any access to computers, or even if you have one computer in your classroom, maybe you can, when students are doing individual work, you can download some books online and then have them ready to go on your computer as PDF files or something like that. And during individual time that your students are working, when students finish early, they can read a book on your computer, something like that. So go ahead and take a look, and you're very welcome. Thanks for thanking me, everybody. Another thing you can do, and I think this is good in a language classroom at any level, to be honest, is to read aloud. So you can find books or articles at the library or online and read them out loud to your classroom. You can ask questions as you're reading. You can show pictures related to the story or to the article that you're reading out loud. But sometimes if it's not possible to print out many copies of a book, or if you don't have a good library at your school, just find a book and read it out loud and discuss some of the vocabulary. Even that is opening your students' minds to what type of literacy they can have access to. And also, you know, sometimes in a book that you read aloud, there are words and vocabulary and expressions and grammar structures that you might have overlooked as a teacher, and will give your students more exposure. Especially if you can do a read aloud about something that you're talking about in class, about the unit that you're studying right then. So I really think reading out loud is very, very powerful. It also helps them to hear. It also improves their listening skills, and it also helps them to hear someone who's hopefully at least a little bit better in English reading something for them. And another thing you can do is a book talk. You want to demonstrate that you are a literate person, that you enjoy reading yourself, so that will be contagious and your students will want to read as well. So you can bring in a book about maybe something you're talking about, or even a very advanced book that may be too difficult for them, and just say, hey, I'm reading this book. It's about blah, blah, blah. And it's a really good book because the characters in the book are these people, or the topic of this nonfiction book is such and such, and this is why I like this book. And then, you know, if your students become better and better readers, they can also do book talks. I agree, Tomas, that yeah, you can definitely do article talks. You don't only have to do books. With any of the ideas I'm giving you here, it applies to any level of reading, low level through high level, and any type of literature, book, poem, article, anything. All right. Let's move to rule number 3. Students are more motivated to read when they have ample opportunities to engage in sustained reading. Sustained reading just means they read by themselves for a period of time. So you can allocate time in your lessons for students to read independently in Spanish or in English. If you're an English teacher, it's probably better to have them be trying to read something in English, and it can be the most simple thing. But it's important for students to realize that they can be independent readers. And you can start off by having students read for just a few minutes and then lengthen the amount of time that you give them to read. Rule number 4, and I think this is one of the most important ones for any type of teaching that we're doing. Students are more motivated to read when they have opportunities to make choices about what they read and how they engage in and complete literacy tasks. So most of us, at least for me, in life in general, don't always like to do things if we're told to do them. Like if you have to do it, it's like a pain, right? You have to pay your bills, you have to exercise, you have to eat healthfully, da 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 da. But if we're given those ideas as options, right? Well, you can choose to do, you can choose to live healthfully, or you can choose not to. But these are the benefits of living healthfully, that sort of thing. We generally are more motivated to do those things. So in the classroom, you want to give your students as many opportunities as you can to be independent and to make their own choices. But you don't want to give a free-for-all, and you don't want to just let them, you know, say, okay, guys, what do you want to do today? What do you want to read? Let's just, you know, let's just read any book that we think of, or let's just read the book that we've been reading all year long, or let's just play a game again today. Not necessarily. You want to give them bounded choices. A bounded choice just means something you as a teacher have already thought about, and you have chosen 3 to 5 options for reading materials and 3 to 5 options for assignments, and then you allow the students to choose out of those 3 to 5 options. So this way you still have control. The students are still meeting the objective that you want them to meet, but they're feeling like they have more control of their own learning. And as we do want our students to leave our classrooms and keep on learning, this is just a way for them to feel more and more of that independence as readers and learners. All right, rule number 5. Students are more motivated to read when they have opportunities to socially interact with others about the text that they are reading. So I believe, and you probably have found this to be somewhat true at least, that our students really like to talk with each other, right? So why not give them the opportunity to talk about what they read? So here's a classroom tip about that. After allowing students to read silently, maybe even if it's just for 2 minutes and it's a very, very simple text, you can give students a chance to turn to a partner and do a quick talk about what they have just read. Give each person a 1-minute turn to talk about what they have read. So even in a higher level class, if you give an article, a research-based article to students, you can have them read the article for 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then they can turn to a partner and just discuss what they learned from that article and what their opinion is of what happened. Or if you have very young learners and they're just beginning to learn how to read in English or in Spanish, You can say, okay, we're going to look at this picture and read the short sentence. I want you to read quietly, and then, you know, give them like 1 or 2 minutes to read, and then turn and talk to their neighbor. They can say something like, there is a boy in the story. There is a girl in the story. So talking about literature doesn't have anything to do necessarily with the level of reading that you're asking your students to do or the age. But it's a really good skill to present. Mini presentations would be great as well. And also, yeah, it's definitely integrating skills because they're developing their speaking and listening skills as they're doing a quick talk. Very good. Thanks for your comments. Rule number 6. Students are more motivated to read when they have opportunities to be successful with challenging text. So we talked about this already. And very soon in the presentation, I'm going to talk about some strategies you can give your students so that they can be more independent and successful. But success just brings more success. When you're good at something, you like it more usually, and you want to do it more often. So here's a classroom tip, and we're going to talk about more of this later, but guide students through scaffolded reading activities in which you help them to make reading materials more accessible. And we're going to talk about lots more reading strategies, so I'm just going to go straight to rule number 7, our final rule. Students are more motivated to read when classroom incentives reflect the value and importance of reading. So an incentive is basically a reward or what the students will get out of reading or what they will get out of reading well. So the best classroom tip I can give you for this one is to give real, specific, honest, and deserved praise to your students and give it as frequently as possible. So research has shown that prizes and that sort of thing don't always do a lot for student motivation, especially in the long run. They definitely have a place in the classroom and they can be motivational in the short term. Or just giving it like smiley faces all the time or always saying good job, good job, good job can actually end up devaluing your good opinion of what's going on with students. So those are both good. If you give prizes in your classroom, or if you put smiley faces on papers, or if you put stars or say good job a lot, don't stop doing that, of course. But what is best is authentic, meaningful, and specific praise. So for example, instead of saying to one of your students, good job, you can say to that student, I can tell that you have been working hard because last week you answered 2 questions correctly and this week you answered 5 questions correctly. So that's very specific. It shows that you are noticing the student's hard work and that you value progress, not necessarily perfection all the time. All right, so those are the 7 rules of engagement, and now we're going to move on to talk about reading comprehension strategies. So now I've talked about some reasons for reading and discussed how one of our goals as teachers should be to help develop lifelong readers and learners. We want them to be motivated and successful readers, so we've already talked about motivation. Now we're going to talk about how we can help them to be more successful with reading comprehension. So these are the strategies we're going to talk about today: making connections, questioning, visualizing, inferring, determining importance and main idea, and synthesizing and summarizing. All of these, the strategies we're going to talk about, can be for any level and most ages. Some of them do require some writing or some higher order thinking skills that really small children probably have not developed quite yet. But especially the first 3 can definitely be used for any age and any level. So these are the types of reading strategies that we can teach and model to our students. And then when students have a firm grasp about how to do these strategies, their reading comprehension levels should increase. So we as teachers need to take some time to understand these strategies and then to teach them and then to model their use. And then we can give our students opportunities to use them and develop independence in using them. And I see a question from Betty, what about skimming and scanning? Yeah, this list here that I have is definitely not exhaustive. There are so many reading strategies that we can teach to our students. These are just some that have proven to be very helpful for a lot of students, but if you are already teaching other reading strategies, of course continue to teach those reading strategies and find other ones, but these are the ones I'm going to talk about today. So the first reading strategy we'll discuss is making connections. So we've already mentioned a bit how it's important for students to make connections between the text and their personal lives. It's also important for them to see how texts connect, compare, and contrast to other things that they read and to other things that go on in the world and to things that they have experienced. So these are the three different types of connections that we can show our students: text to self, text to text, and text to world. And if we could please show the video for this strategy.
Hey, Katie, we're working on it. Hold on just a second, please.
So as we're waiting, I'll just explain a little bit about making connections. So one of the best ways to get students to begin making connections to what they read is as a teacher, you can be thinking aloud. So doing a think aloud is when you read a text and make comments about how it connects to your life.
Well, right.
Oh, that's not the right one.
That's not the one?
Right.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Hold on a second. Is this the first video the first video in your slides?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, hold on.
Here we go.
Is that the one?
Yep. This is it.
Making Connections by Birds on a Wire Productions. Have you ever wondered why good readers make connections to what they're reading? Well, they do it to understand the story at a deeper level. When a reader makes a connection to what they are reading, they usually connect to one of three things. 1. An experience. 2. Another story or another book. And 3. Something most likely from their very own life. Connections can fit into three categories: text to self, text to text, or text to world. Text to self, text to text, or text to world. What connections can you make to the book that you're reading right now? You can even use Post-it notes to write down a specific connection to an event in a story. Making connections will help you understand the book even better.
Okay, so that was just a simple video to show us three ways that we can have our students begin making connections. And the best way to help them understand that is to make your own connections to things that maybe you read aloud in class. You can write down ideas on the board and say something like, I remember a time in my life that was similar to what's happening in this story. Or you can say, for a text-to-text connection, you could say, this article reminds me of another article I just read last week about the same topic. It's similar because this. Or text to world, you could say, I remember hearing about Hurricane Katrina many years ago, and it looks like there are some other difficult situations that people are in now because of severe weather. That would be something that you could do for text to world. And then as you model it more and more, your students, and then give your students opportunities to do the same types of connections, they can become more proficient in that, and hopefully their reading comprehension will increase. So the next strategy is called questioning or asking questions. So most of us have given comprehension questions after we finish something for our students to answer after they finish reading. But what we want to do is for our students to develop their own curiosity. So before they read, we want them to do something like look at the title, look at the cover art, ask who is the author, and then write their own questions to begin to spark their own curiosity. I wonder this, why this, what's going to happen, that sort of thing. And that just helps them to just begin to be more curious as readers. And you can tell them, you know, some of your questions will be answered in this text, and some of your questions will not be answered in this text. If it's not answered in the text, maybe you want to do more reading on this topic. And that just furthers their development as curious and independent learners. So now if we could see the second video about questioning. This video about questioning is a pretty advanced
critical thinking skill.
type of questioning. You don't have to begin with something quite as advanced as this video shows, but this is something you can work towards.
That students can use to strengthen comprehension. This lesson idea will focus on 3 types of question-answer relationships: in the text, in your head, and in another source. Explain to students that effective readers ask questions before, during, and after reading. They seek information and clarify understanding. Start by having students generate questions by reviewing the title of a selection or skimming through the text. Students can record their questions on Post-it notes. Next, read the beginning portion of the text and via Think Aloud, model how to ask questions and record them on Post-its. Allow the students to read the next portion independently or in small groups. Keep in mind that as students generate questions, you may need to plant a few higher-level questions of your own. After students have generated questions on their Post-it notes, explain that there are several types of questions. Some have the answer stated directly in the text. For other questions, in order to answer, you have to add what's in your head, your prior knowledge, to be able to answer. Then other questions have the answer in another source. Use the graphic organizer to have students place their Post-its in the appropriate column. Model with a class-size graphic organizer or chart paper. Students can also work with a group to add their Post-its to a group graphic organizer. Finally, select questions for the students to answer. Explicitly show how answers to in the text questions are found directly in the selection. In your head questions require using your prior knowledge and supporting evidence from the text. After sufficient practice, allow students to work independently. In future lessons, as students move on to making inferences, help them see that inferences are in your head questions. For nonfiction text, it can be especially interesting to challenge students to find the answers to in another source questions on their own. Students can take these challenges for homework and then report back to the class. Asking questions and examining question-answer relationships are ways to improve comprehension and critical thinking. Sometimes finding the right answer requires asking the right questions. Questioning is a critical.
Okay, I saw a few questions about whether this presentation is available after our time here at the webinar. And so at the end of the presentation, I'm going to write down my blog again, and on my blog you can click and download this presentation, which has all of the links for the videos right on the presentation. So don't worry, you can see the videos later and watch them many times, repeat them to understand the strategies a little bit better. I will also write my email, so if you would like me just to send you the presentation, that's no problem. I can just send you the presentation as well. All right, so as I said, these ideas for questioning are a little bit advanced, but something very simple that you can do at any level of readers or learners is that you can start with just a basic brainstorming activity in which the students generate a list of questions before reading and then try to find answers to the questions during and after their time reading. Okay, if we can go to the next slide. Great. All right, so in the interest of time, let's see. So the next strategy is visualizing. And as you can see from the picture and understand from the word itself, visualizing, this strategy just is about making pictures in your mind about what's going on in the story. And we will not show the video for this one in interest of time. I'm just going to talk about it a moment, and then if you want to take a look at another time at this video to understand this strategy a little bit better, that's fine. You can go ahead and do that. So it's important that students be reminded that they should be making mental images in their mind of what's going on. So one way that you can determine whether students are doing that is, just simply asking them to draw pictures or asking them to describe the scenes of what's going on in a text, or even to have students act out or make a dramatic interpretation of what you have read. And that just helps the students to sort of solidify the images that are going on in their minds as they're reading. All right, so those three strategies we just talked about are a little, can be used for high-level students or low-level students, but they are a little bit more of the basic level strategy. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about some more critical thinking skill strategies. So this one is making inferences. So making inferences is when we make judgments or decisions about characters or events. We make predictions about what we think is going to happen, or we draw conclusions about the messages that the author is trying to convey. We usually refer to it as reading between the lines. What is the author saying that he's not exactly explicitly stating in his writing? So let's go ahead and try to look at this video about making inferences.
Making inferences is sometimes called reading between the lines. This essential comprehension strategy requires readers to combine textual evidence with their prior knowledge. This lesson idea focuses on making inferences when reading informational text. Explain to students that people make inferences every day. If someone comes in the room with a wet umbrella, we can make the inference that it is raining outside. And when reading informational text, effective readers make inferences in order to truly understand what they're reading. This activity uses a graphic organizer to organize questions, textual evidence, prior knowledge, and the resulting inference. Open the lesson by reading aloud a portion of an informational text. Via Think Aloud, ask questions about the text. Focus on questions that go beyond what is stated directly in the selection. Here's an example from Patricia Lauber's Volcano. Read the questions in the left column. Allow students to continue reading and add their questions. Circulate to monitor their progress. Next, model how to answer the questions by citing evidence from the text and bringing in your prior knowledge. Use the graphic organizer to lead the process for making an inference. Allow time for guided and independent practice. Sometimes students take making inferences too far, meaning their inference is not a logical guess because it is not firmly based in textual evidence. When students make an illogical inference, prompt them to cite evidence from the text. The process of referring to the text often allows students to self-check their thinking and revise their answer. The process of making inferences can be differentiated by varying the complexity of the questions or the complexity of the text. Keep both factors in mind when planning instruction. For students who are struggling, pull a small group and help them to break down the text and connect what is directly stated with their prior knowledge and experiences. One-on-one conversation can significantly support students' acquisition of this strategy. This lesson idea takes a higher level skill and breaks it down in a graphical format. Making inferences is critical for increasing comprehension. The ability to read between the lines has lifelong benefits.
All right, so as you can see, this one's a little more of a trickier skill, but what you can do is use some of the ideas that she showed there with a graphic organizer. And even if you could even write those ideas on the board, you can write the graphic organizer on the board and sort of guide students through drawing conclusions, understanding things better, and making inferences about what they read. So the next reading strategy is determining importance or finding the main idea. This can be difficult for students in their first or their second language, especially though in English. But this is something that we can help to teach our students through repeated modeling and guided practice, and we can help our students to master this skill. Let's go ahead and take a look at this video as well if we can. So determining, I'll just talk until the video begins. Determining importance refers to the skill of identifying which ideas in a text are the most important. It also refers to being able to understand the main theme or concept of a text. So one way that we can help our students understand the main ideas is to draw them to the title of a text.
You may already
and
have
we'll
done
see a
some
strategy
work on
right
finding
here.
the main ideas in a whole text. Well, right now we're changing scale and we're looking at finding the main idea in a paragraph, so a kind of intensive reading. If you have a look at what you see on the screen, you should see an essay title, and that reads,
Katie,
"The
we're
floods
waiting
of
for the video
2007 were primarily a
to
result
load.
of ineffective
Let's wait
government
for a
policy
couple of
discussed."
a few seconds.
So
We'll
the
see if it
extract
doesn't
which you see
upload.
here, which you're
We'll
going to
just
read,
go ahead and continue with
is
the presentation, if that sounds good.
from
I
a
can
text
see the
which
video.
is
This
related
is looking good.
to this essay title. In fact, it's from the PIT review,
Oh, really?
which
Okay,
is
great.
an independent government review
Because
looking at
I
the
cannot see
lessons
it,
that can be learned from the
but
2007
maybe
floods.
most of the people.
And it's one of the recommendations on what the government should do about floods in the future. So, I'm going to give you a short time to read this paragraph and try and think of which sentence contains the main idea in this paragraph. Did you find the main idea in this paragraph? If you didn't, a good strategy is to try and look for repeated keywords in the paragraph. Here we have an interesting one. There's the words surface water. There needs to be a new emphasis on guarding against this type of flooding, that's surface water. So Michael Pitt says the Environment Energy is best placed to develop a national approach to managing surface water flood risk, including the development of surface water mapping, and it should no longer be a right of householders and businesses to lay impermeable surfaces. That's also related. So if you have a look at this paragraph, surface water or related terms appear 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 times. So the main idea in the is that easy, found in different positions within the paragraph, and also they can be unhidden or unstated. That is, you have to kind of work them out for yourself, which is a little bit more difficult. If you would like more practice on finding main ideas in paragraphs, then feel free to go to the Skills at Library Reading Skills topic page, and you'll find a couple of extra examples on this there.
Okay, so that was one way of finding the main idea, is to find some repeated ideas, and I thought that was an excellent example something that you could show or walk your students through with a nonfiction text. And yes, I do think these strategies can apply to English for specific purposes as well. I think you can use some of these strategies and some you might not use, and you can adapt them for whatever works for your context. Knowing a little bit about these strategies is just a good base knowledge to adapt them to what is best for your students. All right, the final strategy we're going to talk about is synthesizing and summarizing. Summarizing is the skill of condensing a breadth of information about a text or reading into a concise sentence or paragraph that presents the most important facts. And then synthesizing is sort of even bigger than summarizing, and that's putting all the pieces together from all different readings that you're doing and coming up with your own ideas based off of a breadth of knowledge on a topic that you have studied or that your students have studied. So with synthesizing, readers create original insights, perspectives, and understandings. So synthesizing is kind of like summarizing a lot of different texts and then coming up with their own ideas. This is a very advanced skill. Even for us as educators, this is something that we should be constantly working on, and I'm sure you are constantly working on, and probably something that you do naturally without even realizing it. As you're reading, you're kind of making more and more sense of the world and forming your own insights and judgments. But I'm actually going to show you a quick and easy way to do summarizing. And this is something you can do over and over and over with many different kinds of texts in many contexts with many different levels. And it's just the strategy called who wanted but so. And yeah, I agree that summarizing can be very difficult, but you can kind of guide them through something like this. So here is an example after reading a chapter from the book called The Jacket. And you can do this with any story, any article. So who, Phil, wanted to get his brother's jacket back from the nice kid named Daniel, but Daniel claimed it was a birthday present from his grandmother, so they ended up in the principal's office. You can do this with nonfiction articles as well, but if you repeat this again and again, this really helps the students to focus in on the key points of something that they're reading. You can do it, model it for the students multiple times, and then begin to allow them to do it in groups, in pairs, and then finally individually. So here are just some ideas about what happens to students when they become strategic. These are just some benefits. They know there's more than one right way to do things. They acknowledge their mistakes and try to rectify them. They evaluate their products and behavior. Their learning increases, their self-esteem increases. Students develop and use a personal study process. And finally, they know how to try. So even if they're having difficulty with reading something, they know that there are ways that they can supplement their own understanding. And this is just sort of the order of how you should teach the strategies that I've presented today. So the first thing is you should describe the strategy. Hello students, today we're going to read Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and we're going to make connections. We're going to practice the strategy of making connections to our lives from this text. Then number 2, you will model how to make connections. You can do this by thinking out loud and by writing out loud or writing on the board to show them what your thoughts are, drawing pictures, anything just to show them your thought process through these reading strategies. Then number 3 is you provide ample assisted practice time. That means you're helping them through the process as they're beginning to apply these strategies. Number 4, you begin to allow them to self-monitor and to do it more and more on their own. And then number 5, you encourage continued use of the strategy. So you are throughout the year, you are saying, okay, what strategy can you use if you don't understand this text? Maybe you can use the strategy of making connections. Why don't you write some connections you're making from the text to your own life, that sort of thing. And these are just some more reasons why we should train students to use strategies. I will let you read those on your own time because we have about 1 minute to go. And then, of course, my hope would be that you can use at least one idea from this presentation and design something, a portion of a lesson that includes some strategies we learned today, and implement some ideas from today's workshop into your daily instruction. And we're not going to do this because we don't quite have time for it. And those are my sources. So thank you so much for coming. I'm going to put my blog right now in the chat box, so please write it down and come visit me there. And I'm also going to put my email there so that you can email me and ask me for the presentation if you would like to. Yeah, and I'm just really happy you came today. It's an honor to be with you and to be working with the folks at RELO Andes. I really feel very privileged. And yeah, please give me any comments via email or my blog. I'd be happy to hear from you. So thanks, and I hope you all have a great weekend.
Thanks a lot, Katie, and thanks everybody for connecting. By the way, we also have published this PowerPoint in SlideShare. So, and we have already shared the link, so you can actually see the presentation, only the slides, not the whole recording, in SlideShare. And we're going to share the link again in a moment. Thanks everybody for connecting, and also remember joining RELO Andes in Facebook.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks a lot.